In a world that's always racing forward, sometimes we need to slow down and reconnect.
Connect genuinely, broaden your perspective, and share your passion.
Bona fide dialogues, where authenticity, creativity, and passion merge.
Welcome to BONA Dialogues.
Molly Tomlin is an etiquette consultant and founder of Crown and Courtesy, a modern etiquette and refinement brand rooted in British tradition and tailored for contemporary living. With British and American etiquette certifications, Molly expertly fuses timeless principles with modern polish to help women navigate social and professional spaces with confidence, grace, and quiet power. Her work empowers women to refine their presence and command a room with authenticity and elegance. Through her digital courses, private coaching, and speaking engagements, Molly equips her audience with tools to elevate their communication, social presence, and self-assurance. She draws on personal experience and a deep passion for refined living to deliver practical advice that resonates meaningfully. Molly's warm teaching style and thoughtful approach have made her a respected voice among those seeking a sophisticated yet accessible approach to etiquette. Her insights encourage women to build a confident and impactful personal brand that reflects their inner strengths and the nuanced demands of today's social and professional environments.
Etiquette was a big part of my upbringing, but now many people look at etiquette as something like dying art, unfortunately. So how do we keep it alive?
I think by just, practicing it and, teaching it to our children is one great way to keep it alive, but also just practicing it because when other people see that you have great manners, you have beautiful etiquette, they feel inspired to also have that great etiquette and have those great manners as well. They kind of, at first it might be a little bit of a mimicking motion, but then it becomes just a daily practice for them as well. So the best way for us to kind of keep that, keep the etiquette alive is by practicing it ourselves and then influencing others to have that wonderful etiquette and beautiful manners in their lives as well.
Wonderful. And you just mentioned etiquette and manners. What's the difference?
This is a big question that I get asked a lot. Is there a difference between etiquette and manners? Are they related? They're related, but they are different. So etiquette is the formal set of codes and decorum that dictate how you behave, depending on where you are or the specific situation that you are in. Manners are those things that we teach children. They're universal, just those good manners. It does not matter where you are in the world. If you have good manners, then you'll be just fine. So for most people, I would say making sure that you have good manners and are practicing that, saying please and thank you, showing kindness and consideration to others is going to take you really, really far. You may not always need those formal, specific etiquette rules. They're great to know, but you don't always need them. And good manners are the basis of all etiquette.
And what inspired you to specialize in etiquette?
Etiquette has been something that I have always been interested in since I was a very, very young child. I grew up with parents who taught me great etiquette and good manners, like most Southern parents do. But I never went through formal training as a child. I wanted to, though. I was that child that wanted to go to cotillion classes, but I was very busy with sports and other things, so I never got that opportunity. And so when I was an adult, I had the opportunity to go through formal training and take some courses. So I did. And then it wasn't until after I got married and I left my previous job that I decided to go for my certification, like actually start doing this possibly as a career. I wasn't really sure where I wanted to go with it at first, but I knew that I wanted to at least explore it and go for my full certification. And more deep training on
It seems
etiquette.
like you're passionate about. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I love it.
Mhm.
And I think most people don't know that you can get certified in etiquette. Could you please tell us more about it? And also, I know that you're teaching etiquette. So
Mhm.
maybe you can give us a little bit of information about your classes.
Mhm. So with etiquette certification, you know, back in the day, there used to be a lot more schools that taught like those finishing schools, and you could go through a finishing school, not necessarily go into teaching etiquette, but they would then, have programs where you could get certified. Those are not as common now, but many of the more accomplished, more well known trainers have started to do certification programs where you go through 6 months to a year, um, learning everything you possibly can about, certain topics. And then at the end of it, you sit for an exam and you are graded on them. It goes into a lot more detail than you would if you were just taking an etiquette course, because we need to know the how, the why, the when, so that we can go and teach them, teach our students all of those details. So we really need to know each topic, as well as we can.
Detail, yeah.
Yeah, in detail. And then you can also specialize in certain things. I haven't taken protocol classes yet, or I've taken some, but they've been very, short courses. I would love to take more protocol. You can focus on afternoon tea. You can focus on certain countries, business, children's etiquette. So I find that a lot of trainers will start with general etiquette, social, and business, and then they will add more certifications on where they're really focusing on very specific things like protocol or children's etiquette. And then for me, my teaching, I love teaching social etiquette. Business etiquette is great as well. I love that. But social etiquette is something that I personally love so, so much, especially when it comes to dining, which I also teach a lot of like client entertaining, dining etiquette for business meals, to a lot of my business clients. But I teach in person here in Dallas. I teach one on one virtually. I have short programs, I have long programs. I really try to tailor my trainings around my clients, especially if it's a one on one. And then I do speaking gigs or come into, you know, corporations or businesses that want business etiquette. My business etiquette is more towards the younger generation, those who maybe just graduated from college or in their first job, rather than, let's say, the CEO. Sometimes I might be brought in to work with, exec teams because or people who are stepping into leadership roles who want to
Yeah.
brush up. Yeah, they want to brush up on their business etiquette, especially if they are entertaining clients, then I work with them. But a lot of executives have already gone through a lot of training. So my business focus is more towards those who are a little bit newer in their career or who want to brush up on some, business etiquette, especially if it's client entertaining and maybe doing some international business travel as well.
Oh, it sounds like there's so much to learn, right?
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
surprised that we don't have classes in high school, for example, right? Teaching etiquette. That
Oh,
would be so helpful. Like to
I agree.
anyone, it doesn't matter which career you choose,
Mhm.
it would help you.
Yes, absolutely. I'm actually working on a e-guide right now for young women who are entering college, and it's just kind of a basic etiquette guide for young women entering college who want to make sure that they, start on the right foot and know how to go through the next, stage of their life with elegance and poise and confidence as well. And I think a lot of the tips that are in there are going to be great for their first jobs as well.
Elegance and confidence. This
Yeah.
is so important. I love
Yeah.
it. That
Yeah.
that's great. We need to bring more light and more attention to this subject. I don't think people
Absolutely.
realize how important it is, and it
Mhm.
makes huge difference in
Yeah.
your everyday interaction. Doesn't matter if it's in business or in your personal life.
Yes, absolutely. It's just a sign of, respect and consideration for others, and it just helps us connect in a way that is comfortable for others. I think now, especially in the US, we can be really focused on ourselves and how we feel and how things are making, or impacting our lives. And etiquette, it kind of challenges us to make sure that we're thinking about others as well, maybe others' comfort and their the way that we're interacting, and it just makes things just a much more pleasant, world to live in when we use those tools.
Being more considerate and
Hmm.
just knowing those rules. Like you said, in business, there's so
Yeah,
many questions for someone who just entering that space. What do I do?
absolutely.
How do I act in this situation? What's the right way to address this topic or that topic? But what
Yeah,
are the common mistakes that we usually make in our everyday life
yeah.
from your point
Um,
of view?
From my point of view, I would say, one of the things is having loud phone calls out in public. Sometimes you can't help it. You have to take that call out in public. But instead of, in an airport, loudly speaking on your phone in front of everyone, maybe step away to a corner to have your phone call. Or the worst is when you take a phone call at a restaurant at the table when you have other diners around you. We don't need to subject other people around us to our, intimate details of our lives or our professional lives. So, me being mindful of other people's experiences around us, and just step away, to a corner quietly, take that phone call, and then come back to whatever it is that you're
Especially
doing. That's a big one.
professional.
Yeah. Another one I would say is a lot, and we all do this. I even catch myself doing this, but putting our phone on the dining table when we're out
Mm.
to lunches, especially if you are in a business lunch, not putting your phone on the table because it can be a distraction to you. It's very, we're all glued to our devices. And if it's there, you might pick it up and start you know, doing what, checking email or heaven forbid, scrolling social when you should really be more present with the person that you're dining with. And so just removing that distraction for yourself and just don't keep it on the table. I sometimes will work with moms who will say, oh, well, I need to have my phone on me because I might hear from the babysitter or whatever. And that's totally understandable. But just tuck it maybe under your leg for a second because you can feel it if it vibrates, instead of having it present on the table. So nothing that you are not using to eat with should ever be on the dining table. So
Mm.
phone, keys, purse, things like that.
Yes, I have like a little hook for my purse.
Yes.
So I always have it with me, one in my
Yeah.
one is
Yes. Exactly.
very
Yeah.
helpful because with purses it's always uncomfortable. If you put it behind, it's not safe.
Yeah.
And if you're in
Yes.
nicest restaurant, you know,
Yeah.
putting it in front of you, it's also
Yes.
uncomfortable. But this little
Yeah.
is such a lifesaver for me personally.
Yeah, exactly. Like the hook can be great. And I encourage a lot of my clients to go with smaller purses, which sometimes they definitely would fight back on. They're like, no, I need all of this stuff. Because if you do have a smaller purse, it is easier if you do forget that hook or you don't want to use a hook for you to like tuck it to the side and stuff. But yeah, purses can be uh, a little difficult to handle and stuff. But yeah, try to keep everything off the dining table, especially those phones.
It also shows how organized you are, right?
Yes, exactly.
Tells you a lot about the person.
Yes. People, make assumptions about you based on so many different things. I, like to talk about making sure that your first impression is the best possible, which, we all know that. We know that we want to make a good first impression, but we sometimes don't think about those little tiny details that are detracting from that wonderful, person of who we are and that impression that we're trying to give. And an overstuffed handbag with papers coming out, or like, heaven forbid, like shoes or, toys, whatever it is that might be in there, that makes you look maybe distracted or frazzled, not put together, not really like ready or prepared and present for whatever it is that you are walking into. So being mindful of things like that. We can also go to the materials that you use when you walk into a meeting. Is your pen, like chewed on, having a nice, looking pen that you take out to take notes. That will, yeah, it helps you look more polished, and you look more polished, the other person's going to be like, oh, this person is trustworthy. This person is very competent, and
There's so
it,
much in
it,
details, right?
yeah, those little details that people don't think about. Another one that I do personally, because I have very long hair, and I personally can get distracted by my hair, but I will leave, like hair ties on my wrists, and that also just takes away from that overall polished look. Like you can just tuck that into a bag, and if you need to take it out, you have it and stuff. But I always have to be like, oh wait, I have a hair tie on my wrist.
Yeah, because there's so much to discuss. I was
Yeah.
thinking maybe you can tell us what are the main areas of etiquette that we should keep in mind.
hmm I think the main thing is always just start with kindness. Like I said before, you don't have to know exactly which fork you have to use during this certain part of a meal to be a proper, young woman or young man, but just going with kindness. If you just think, how can I show kindness or consideration, be thoughtful about everything that you're doing, then that is going to make a huge impact on your relationships, with whether they're both personal or professional. And so I think just starting with kindness is a big thing. And then also, you know, layering on top of that, making sure that you say thank you and send out thank you notes or thank you emails. A lot of people don't really think about that too often. And I have forgotten as well. The wonderful thing about thank you notes is while you should try to do it immediately after a meeting or you've been hosted, you can send it. There's never a timeline where you can't send a thank you note. A late thank you note
Better
is better than
later
no
than
thank
never.
you. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So things like that. And then, being mindful, also of like RSVPs, that's a great thing. And then I would say the other big etiquette tip or good manners tip that would make a huge impact that you should definitely always is think about how you are in groups and how you make introductions. Many people are shy or introverted, reserved, and they have a hard time in groups. And if you can be that connector, if you can be that person that makes everyone feel included and are great at making introductions, I mean, the sky's the limit for you, because people will be instantly drawn to you because you are radiating this warmth and this kindness by including everyone. And a lot of people don't do that. Like a lot of people will have conversations and it'll be in a group, and someone will come and they just forget to introduce the person, and they just assume that everyone feels included, but it can make people feel left out a lot. So if you can work on being that person that makes everyone feel included, that feels connected, if you just can think, oh, I know Susie has, something in common with Jill, and they really should meet, and being that person, whether it's email or, in person, I think that is an amazing skill that we all can, work on. But if you want to focus on one thing, I think that's a great one to start with.
Oh, wonderful. That's a great advice.
Mhm.
Why do you think etiquette is important in business?
I think etiquette is really important in business. depends on where you are in your career. If you are in a senior role already, you've been working for quite a while, I would say focusing less on the etiquette side and more on that rapport building side is great. And you still use that etiquette and those good manners to build rapport with your employees who are below you. But it just helps, foster those great relationships. And then if you are newer in your career, if you're just starting out, focusing on the more formal parts of business etiquette will help you foster better relationships with not only your colleagues, but possibly clients and, those that you might report to, and then set you up for leadership roles because they will see that you know how to handle yourself probably in multiple different ways, handle yourself during the meetings, handle yourself during client interactions, handle yourself with those who are above you and below you. And it's just a great thing that helps you foster stronger working relationships. And when you can show that you can do that, people want to work with you, they want to buy from you, they want to, help you as well, help you get ahead.
The way people think
Mhm.
about etiquette, it's usually something for women. But
Yes.
I thought it's so important to let everyone know that it's for everyone. In
Yes.
the relationships, for example, between men and women, there's so many rules about how ladies should behave, but there are also
Yep.
rules for men, right?
Yes, that's true. We don't often hear about the etiquette rules for men. That's not as common um, to see, especially in the social media world or just out there in public. But they're super important. And nowadays, it depends on the country that you are in, but in the U.S our etiquette rules have evolved and most etiquette rules around the world have evolved and in business they etiquette rules do not really change based on gender. It's more on hierarchy. In social, if you're a very traditional formal person, you might follow certain rules that for men versus women, or certain things, But in business, the rules are just the rules. They're not just for men or for women. It's based on seniority hierarchy. Um,
Interesting. No, that's good to know, I think, for everyone.
yeah.
And I would love to briefly touch on netiquette. This is a new
Yes.
area of etiquette. We think
Yeah.
etiquette is something old, out of style, but
Mhm.
there's new area that just developed, and I think it's fair to say it's still developing. Could you
Yes.
please talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, like I said before, etiquette evolves, society evolves, and now we have great technology, and especially over the past couple years where we have had even more technology and more ways to connect, we have to have, etiquette or netiquette to to navigate it all. So I think one of the things that's super important is with Zoom calls, video calls, Google Meet, whatever it is that your office uses, you should be treating those type of calls the same way that you would treat an in-person meeting. Um, you should have your camera on because we need to connect. You should, if it's not your turn to talk, mute it. Be dressed, appropriately, have an appropriate background. If you don't, use a virtual one, those type of things. You want to still treat that meeting like a normal in-person meeting. Another thing is with emails, Slack messages, all those type of things, also treating those emails with a little bit more formality. Don't use text speech if it's in a business situation. Make sure that you are emailing or sending a message during appropriate times. If you know that this person is several time zones later and that they have a hard time disconnecting from their work, don't send them a message at 10 p.m. on a Friday night. Schedule that message to be sent, so that way that you don't forget about it, but you're also being really respectful of their boundaries and their working hours as well.
Right. There's so much to learn, and I think it's all helpful. I
Hmm.
know that writing in capital, it's considered to be like shouting. Don't do that.
Yes.
Sometimes people do it just to bring more attention to what they're saying, but it can
Yes.
be received negatively.
Yep. Yes, exactly. And that one is one that I've always found very interesting because I don't look at capital letter. I know this rule, but I don't ever look at it myself as being like, oh, they're shouting at me. I just am like, it's all in caps. But that one has been around for quite a while.
You- Is there any advice that you can give a new couple, for example?
Yes.
There are any rules that would be nice to follow?
Nice to follow. I think, if you are the person asking the other one out on a date, you should plan the date from the very beginning to the very end and be very thoughtful about things like that. It really depends how you feel like traditionally versus, more modern dating. And that's a very personal choice. But, let's say, okay, the man has asked the woman out on a date, and then he should, be very mindful of all the details and plan it from the very beginning to the very end. And I think that is, you know, that just makes the date so much more enjoyable and so much more fun. You're trying to provide an experience for that person to get to know them as well. So I think that's a very important one. I love, my husband does this, and I'm very traditional myself and
Me
very
too.
proud to be that way. And so I love that if I get up from the table, my husband stands up, and I just think that's a beautiful sign of respect that he does for me. And he just gets, he just stands up as I leave the table and sits back down. And I just think that is such a lovely thing. I don't find, for me personally, like I said, I'm very traditional. I don't find men opening a door for me and holding it open, like that's not an insult to me. I see it as just a sign of respect. They're just showing respect. So I think things like that are great. There is this traditional rule of the man should always be on the outside of facing the street when you're walking down a sidewalk, so they should be closer to where the cars are versus women. Nowadays, I would say I think it's a beautiful tradition, but if you swap that, sometimes that can be really nice because there's grates closer towards the buildings often. And if you're wearing heels, then maybe he's switching so that you don't have to walk, on the
I
grates or
pay
tiptoe over
attention
them.
to those details.
Yeah, so paying attention to those little details, that's kind of
Very nice to see
this,
the men
yeah,
doing
it's exactly. It's one of those things where good manners trumps the etiquette. So the etiquette would be that the man should walk closer to the cars because he's protecting you for the cars. But, in a modern world, he's going to show good manners by saying, oh, there's a grate over there. So I'm going to switch sides so that she doesn't have to walk on her tippy toes and her heels over the grate. So I think things like that are really nice.
Yeah, my background is from Eastern Europe. I was born
Hmm.
in Russia, grew up in Ukraine, and there's so many rules,
Yes.
that are not applicable here. For
Yep.
example, holding a jacket for a woman, it's a
Yep.
must. For
Hmm.
example, if you have lunch or dinner and you're
Yep.
ready to leave the restaurant, you don't just do it yourself. If you're with the man, he needs to hold it for you.
Yep.
I
Exactly.
don't
I
see
actually,
men doing
yeah.
it often here.
No, they don't, but I love that. I love how beautifully traditional, Russian and Eastern European etiquette can be. I think it's so fascinating. There's a couple of women who teach, on social media who are in Eastern Europe, and while I cannot understand, them without translators, I can see the skills that they're teaching visibly, and I think it's wonderful. But for me, it's great because I am very traditional. I am very feminine, and I love those, and I teach that. For me, when I teach my clients, I always start out with, I will teach you the most formal etiquette, and then from
Because
there, yeah, we can adapt based on the situations, but at least yes, you might not be invited to a garden party at Buckingham Palace, and need to know certain things, but you might be invited to a very formal dinner, and that etiquette still will apply, and
and you can
it's
create
great to
your
know.
own, right, at home.
Yes,
You make it
exactly.
beautiful and formal. It doesn't have to
Y-
be, like you said, not
mhm.
everyone has access to those places where
Yes.
etiquette is required.
Yeah,
You can create
exactly.
your own space for that, make it special and beautiful.
Yes.
When it comes to etiquette rules applicable to men, I think they're very, very important. And I'm teaching my son that as well. And I love that you mentioned in the beginning of this
Mhm,
dialogue that the best way to keep this dying art is to teach our children
mhm.
those rules.
Yes. Yeah, because they will remember it. There's so many times where I've worked with, you know, adults who will say, "I learned etiquette as a child, but I want, refreshers." Or they will say themselves, "I learned etiquette. It was wonderful. It's been so great in my life. I want my children to know this because I know how important it is and how great it has been for me in my personal, my professional life and set me up for success. So I want to give that to my children."
Wonderful. And we did talk a little bit about cultural differences,
Hmm.
but I wanted to ask you this question. Now that we travel, go
Hmm.
to different countries, maybe you can touch on this cultural differences that we need to keep in mind, especially when we travel.
Yeah. A big thing I would say if you are traveling is one, just to look it up. It's very easy to look up certain things about the culture. Just look up what things they might value. A lot of countries compared to or what I would call maybe quieter, more reserved countries compared to the US. So if you know that you're going to a country that values reserved speech and like tone, be mindful of things like that. I think that's a great thing to just be mindful of when you're traveling is the tone and the pitch of your voice when you're out in public. Don't really think about that a lot, but if you look it up, there's a lot of countries that are
Yeah,
very big on being quiet or are known for
yeah.
being quiet countries. And also understanding physical space and touch. How
Mm,
do those countries go about those things? Should you never shake hands, never
yeah.
offer, never, touch? Or should you expect them to be more in your physical space as well? Some countries can be the opposite, where they don't really value physical space that much. And so for them, they're going to be a little closer. So I just think keeping in mind those type of things, communication styles, that's a big one if you're in doing international business. Understanding the communication and negotiation styles of those countries will help you during those meetings because you know what to expect and how to modify yours to meet theirs because you're going into that space. Just being mindful that you're in their country, you're in their space, and you should be adapting your behaviors, your decorum towards them. Like I said, good manners, please, thank you. All of those things are universal. So you're always going to be polite with that. But knowing certain things that, in France, when you walk into any restaurant, any store, anything, say hello. Even if you don't see the shopkeeper, just say hello. You know, that's something that is very big there. There's certain countries where they are very big on their greetings and just understanding that. Also, especially if they do the cheek kiss and the air kiss, look up how many kisses it might be because there are some countries where it's quite a few. I feel like, Eastern Europe, it's like a lot. Am I wrong?
Yes, yes, that's
Yeah,
true.
you go back and forth like quite a few times. So knowing
I,
exactly how many.
I have some examples to address some of your suggestions in terms
Yes.
of loud and quiet. I remember then I
Hmm.
immigrated to the United States 22 years
Yes.
ago. I came and my first impression was that it's more loud here. People are more
Yes.
excited and show their
Hmm.
emotions. Like
Yes.
Eastern Europe is more reserved.
Yes.
Saying hello here, you would say hello to somebody who is walking by there, would say, why are you saying hello to me? I don't know you. What do you want from me? It's like, that would be
Yes.
strange. Don't do that. Don't say hello to people on the street,
Yeah.
And in terms of space, after living in
Hmm.
the United States for many years, I went
Yeah.
back to Ukraine to visit my
Hmm.
family. And it felt to me that people don't respect my personal space. Like you
Yep.
go to the store and everybody gets so close to you. I felt so
Yep.
uncomfortable. So this is
Hmm.
something I really love about our country here in the United
Yes.
States, that we really value privacy and we
Yep.
protect this personal space of each individual everywhere. You can see
Absolutely.
it at the bank, at the store, on the street.
Yes, yeah, and just being aware of these things, of the cultural norms of the country that you're going to, will just help you relax a little bit more, stand out less, and show kindness and consideration as a tourist or traveler. Um, but it just will make things so much more pleasant because you won't be like, "Oh my gosh, why are they so
Yeah, I
close to
know.
me?" Or you won't be going like, why are they 30 minutes late, to this meeting? Well, because certain countries with their punctuality, some are sticklers, and then there's other ones who are a little bit more relaxed and stuff, but then would, be completely mortified if you showed up late but they're just a little bit more relaxed with their punctuality.
Germany is opposite, right?
Yes, yeah,
They're very
exactly.
much
Yeah, I was going to say Germany, Japan, very, very strict with their punctuality, which I think is great personally, as someone who stresses about being late, I like
being
being
on
on
time.
time.
I have never been to Japan. It seems to me, and I would love to go, that you have to
Mhm.
do a lot of research
Yes.
before you go
Yeah.
there. It seems like their culture has a lot of rules
Yes.
other than
Yeah.
comes to etiquette.
Absolutely. And I would suggest if you are doing business in certain countries, really looking into maybe doing a couple of business etiquette courses with someone who has a focus in those countries is, or getting some books too. There's great books out there that can focus on certain ones, but that will be key, especially if you're doing work or business with Asian countries, because you want to make sure that you are showing a lot of respect during those meetings and just having that great understanding of their culture and their etiquette, will help you. It could make or break, some of those meetings as well. So,
Exactly. They will see it right away. They will know
yeah.
that you're well prepared, that you took your
Yeah.
time. And for them, respect means a lot.
Yeah.
Like it's for
Exactly.
all of us.
Yes, yeah, we all do it, but there's certain times and certain places where, that could be a
That
deal
extra
breaker. If
step, that a
a little
little
extra
bit
step.
more, right,
Yes,
will make
yes,
a big
exactly.
difference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And we have been talking a lot about kindness today. I
Yes.
usually ask my guests, what does kindness mean to you? And
Mhm.
I wanted to ask you this question, but it seems to me that you mentioned kindness
Yep.
throughout our dialogue. If there's
Mhm.
anything you could add, it seems like kindness is important. It's the key when it comes to etiquette. Is that true?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that at the end of the day, kindness is the root of etiquette. It is the basis of it, and you can't have one without the other. So, with etiquette, we are trying to show that kindness and respect to another individual, and not because we want it necessarily back. I mean, although, sometimes that happens, but really we're just doing it to show kindness, right? Kindness is not a transactional type of thing. That you're just doing it, out of the goodness of your heart and out of respect for others around you.
And because you know so many rules, and you can see all of us doing everything wrong,
Yeah.
you have to stay so kind.
Yes. Yes.
I'm sure you don't say, "Oh, don't do this. This is wrong." Like, how do you handle those situations in your personal life, and like your husband or somebody you know or somebody you don't even know breaking the rules?
Yes, I know. The thing is once you learn the etiquette rules, you see it everywhere. But it's important to know that we should never use etiquette or manners to put other people down. We shouldn't use it, to judge them or to set ourselves above them. That it would be very poor manners. And we, shouldn't go around correcting bad etiquette. Yes, I do correct people's bad etiquette when they come to me as a client, but I would never correct them in person. And there's a lot of things like that where people think that correcting someone's bad behavior or grammar or spelling or things like that it's it's helping the other helping, but really it's not. It's actually a personal thing. It's helping yourself feel more comfortable, for whatever reason that something triggered yourself. And the reason why we don't want to do that is it can be embarrassing for the other individual, or it could highlight something that we don't actually know about them. So we never want to go about correcting people. It's different when you come in for training because you're asking to learn, and I wouldn't, yes, there's correction with it, but it's learning. It's not pointing something out that you did poorly and now I want to make you aware and therefore may possibly embarrass you, or point out or bring to light something that maybe you weren't wanting to, share with the world. Like, lots of people like to correct people's grammar, and I make grammar mistakes all the time myself personally because I'm going too fast with things. I'm not really thinking, and then, most of the time we understand what it is that person meant. We don't really need it to be, but we could understand them clearly, so we don't really need to correct them. But maybe if we didn't know, maybe they
maybe it's their second language, right?
Maybe it's their second language, exactly. Or maybe they're dyslexic and they try to keep that private and hidden and things like that. So we really want to be mindful that we don't use etiquette to, embarrass anyone else and correct it.
Making mistakes, I think it's such a human side of us. Now with ChatGPT, everyone's email looks the same. As an immigrant, I remember sending emails at work. I would read and reread them 3-4 times, making sure there's no mistakes. So I wanted to be perfect.
Yeah.
And later, then I worked at the international company with people all over the world, from India, from Europe, from different countries. And I loved receiving those emails with this English that is, broken English. But now with ChatGPT, all emails look the same.
Yes.
I miss that, character. I loved how that person would say it. It's like their signature. This is how they express themselves. This is how they speak in real life. and was the beauty of it. It doesn't have to be perfect. And now I think we're losing it with artificial intelligence tools that are being overused. Like you don't have to be perfect. You know, you're conveying your message, you're doing it in your own way. And I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you know, there's such a focus on perfection, especially in my world. There, you know, we have to be, you know, everything has to be super perfect at all times, you know, and if it's not, then you are not proper, you're not elegant, you know, you're not poised. And there is a beauty in those imperfections, and it's real life too. And I think as long as we try our best, you know, and are thoughtful about things, it's okay. Most of the time we understand, you know, everyone who's speaking to us, or we understand if it's a mistake, and being okay with those, you know, showing a little bit of grace when someone makes a mistake goes a long way.
And I love elegance. I think it's such beauty.
Yes. Yeah, same. I love elegance. I love teaching elegance and speaking about it.
You are so elegant. You know?
Thank you very much.
With you and looking at your Instagram account, there's so much beauty in it. It's wonderful. Thank you for sharing all of this. And where can our listeners find you and follow you? And maybe somebody wants to sign up for your classes?
Yeah, and so I am on Instagram at Etiquette, and you know, I started with that one, and I kept it there because I grew on it. But my website is crownandcourtesy.com. My business is Crown and Courtesy. I'm also on YouTube now at Crown and Courtesy. So the only thing that's not rebranded to Crown and Courtesy is my Instagram. It's just MT Etiquette still. And then if you are interested in courses, you can reach out to me via my website, email, or send me a message on Instagram. I can point you in the right direction. Like I said, I tailor most of them, but I do have a masterclass that's coming up in June, on June 26th, that is all about presence, elegant presence, and confidence. So we'll talk a lot about first impressions and handling ourselves in situations, especially social situations, which will be great. I'm super excited about it. And then I also have several different e-guides. I feel like I'm always writing new ones based on my one-on-one clients. You know, they ask me to work on some stuff, and I'm like, oh, that would be great for the masses. So I will take it and stuff. And so I have those are on my website, and then also on my Instagram. It's very easy to find them. But that's
and
multiple ways to find me.
Individuals can reach out to you, and companies too.
And companies, companies are great. I do that. I travel as well. You don't have to just be Texas or Dallas based. And I also do virtual trainings. So all the options.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.